Okay, welcome to our class on the positivity bias. We are on chapter 25. And last week last session, we had talked about if you see something from a new paradigm shift, if you see something from a new way of looking at something, that can change the way we interact with that concept by just reframing it, putting it in a different right. So we did that with present and future, but here what's unique is actually going backwards in time to try and reframe past experiences and see them in a different light. So this example here, the first example is Rabbi Zion Weiner had an audience with the Rebbe, and he spoke about something which had been bothering him for a long time, which is that someone had borrowed a large sum of money from him and had never actually paid him back. And he felt frustrated, he felt betrayed, and he felt that, just a lot of negative feelings about it, right? So when he talked to the Rebbe about this, the Rebbe said, perhaps it's as if when we have money that comes in, so we have a choice of how we're going to do things with that money. And there's money that we spend on tzedakah and we give away for tzedakah. And there's other things we purchase and other things. What we do with our money, that God puts that in our hands to see how we're going to manage it, right? It could be that those things get eaten up by other expenses that we don't enjoy. I have my son-in-law, his dad says there's always a parking place. Some are more expensive than others, but there's always a place to park in the city. But parking expenses or traffic violations, or which can be frustrating expenses, or it could also be medical expenses, right? And so those are not pleasant expenses. So the Rebbe was saying is that sometimes the money that we get is not going to go to us, but it could go to other places in more pleasant ways. And if not medical expenses or something like that, then maybe a loan to a friend that ends up being a donation, not a loan. It's a nicer way to end up having lost your money. You could have lost it to medical expenses. You could have lost it to other traffic violations. It could have lost it to lots of things. Nicer to have lost it to someone else who needed it. And so he reframed that loss to help him get a different perspective of it in a positive way. And again, it's a mindset. It's just a change it's just a decision to see things in some way of a positive light, to search for the light in it, right? The big story here that's a powerful story that I've seen videos of of people involved in this. This is the opportunity to reframe very painful experiences, right? Moshe Levi was a sergeant in the IDF forces during the Yom Kippur War. The unit he led was defending Fort Budapest, which was the only Israeli bunker on the Suez Canal to withstand the Egyptian tanks. He's one of the only 40 people awarded the Israeli Hero Medal, Israel's highest decoration for valor in combat. Yet, the trauma he suffered, he couldn't overcome. He was stressed by it, and he went to many rabbis and he didn't have answers for what happened there. The only fortification between the Egyptians and Tel Aviv was Fort Budapest. They didn't have nearly enough weapons to face off against tanks. One brave soldier asked for permission to speak, and he said, "Have bitachon, faith in God." He cried with his entire being, as only one who stares the death in the eye can have. "Do you know how we will ward off the enemy? With our heartfelt prayers to God Almighty." And he gave this powerful speech, and it penetrated their hearts and encouraged all of them. And in that moment, Moshe of our story felt a real religious experience, a real closeness to God. And he said, God, if you get us through this, I will put on tefillin every day. And in an explosion, a flash of sound and fury, dust and metal, it was over. Miraculously, the Egyptians had been rebuffed. They turned and they ran. Crazy, but they did. Moshe, who had made a vow to God to put on tefillin, was injured. His left arm was blown off, the one he would use to put on tefillin. And the only casualty was the one who had aroused all of them to betachon and faith in God. And he couldn't settle with that they all survived except him. And Moshe, who just had this religious connection with God, was now, his arm was blown off, and that was the one he would use to put on tefillin. And he just sank deeper and deeper into despair. Had an audience with the Rebbe. And he asked the Rebbe, how could this be? And the Rebbe said, acknowledged the pain, and then gently said, perhaps this was God's way of telling you that your relationship with God is unconditional. He loves you not for what you may or may not do, but simply who you are, like a parent loves a child. You don't have to bargain with God. He just loves you. And this helped Moshe to start to feel different and to be able to come to terms with the loss. And regarding the one who was passed away, his mesiras nefesh, his sacrifice for them, to encourage them in their last moments, was a great schus for him. So it's a way to see a Torah perspective that things that are extremely painful don't have to overwhelm us, don't have to consume us. And from God's perspective, they may not be so horrific as we feel them. You know, God does not see things the way we see things, and we don't understand the way God sees things. But then if we could, we would be God. And we're not. We're human. We are mortal. So we can't see the way God sees things. And again, taking this idea then, and now the Rebbe talks about the Holocaust. So this was a Yud Aleph Nisan Farbrengen. Yud Aleph Nisan is the 11th day of Nisan, just before Passover. It's the Rebbe's birthday. There was a public Farbrengen. This was in 1973. So back in 73, I would say that 50 years ago, there was a lot more Holocaust awareness than there is today. We're still talking about a lot of people who were survivors that were alive at that time. And the Rebbe said at the Farbrengen, can a spear or a sword harm something spiritual? Obviously, the question itself would be ludicrous, because a sword or a spear is something physical, and the spiritual is metaphysical. How could it cause any harm? Everyone knows that fire can only injure the body, but it cannot burn the soul any more than water can drown the soul. So what's a person's essence? What's the essence of a person? The essence of the person is not the goof, the body. It's the godly soul that's within the goof. It's the body. The body is just the shell or the tool by which the soul finds its expression in thought, speech, and action.
Mm-hmm.
So the soul, that's truly infinite. It's not consumed by time and space. So what Rebbe was saying, that this soul, even when it was sent to Auschwitz, and it gave its life for being Jewish, Al Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, the body was taken, but the soul was not. And the bond between body and soul may have been broken, but the soul lives on into eternity. So there's no reason to say that any physical changes in this world actually affect the soul. There's no reason to say that the soul ever ceases to exist. So if someone were to come and report, I met a person once, for a moment, the person was crying desperately. It must be that their entire life was incredibly full of pain and suffering. How do I know? Because I met them for a moment and they were in terrible pain in that moment. Well, clearly that doesn't make sense, because that one moment doesn't define their whole life. Rebbe says, likewise, those who perished in the death camps, they lived a certain number of years before that. And afterwards, their neshamas continued to live on for thousands of years to come. We saw or understood that person in a terrible moment of pain, but compared to the soul's life of eternity, that's just a passing moment. It's illogical to conclude by observing 1 minute of a soul's eternal life that this unequivocally proves that their soul was tormented. So the Rebbe was saying is that we can choose to focus on the moments of trauma. We can focus on how bad things are in our most painful events in life. But they're only short-lived. They're only momentary. I was meeting with someone this week who's gone through one series of traumas after another. His father and I were in college together many years ago, and we were in yeshiva together. We had a lot of time together. He lost his father, lost his mother, going through a horrendous divorce. You know, he's like almost got nothing on, Eil's got nothing on him, right? But how do you maintain a positive focus with one tragedy after another? But if you add up the tragic moments and add up the wonderful moments between them, there's more wonderful moments. But we tend to not focus on those. We tend to get fixated on the traumas. I remember someone talking about the mind and memory, how fascinating. You know, 6 years of driving the same route to work, day in and day out, in the morning and in the evening, back and forth, takes up this little spot of memory. Yeah, I used to drive the 405 from Long Beach down to Huntington Beach every morning and go back, and thank God the traffic was always the opposite way. I was going south when traffic was going north. That's one little bite of memory. But I did the same thing every day for 6 years. On the other hand, a 6-day vacation with the kids in a cabin up in the woods, I got lots of memories of that. What do we choose to focus on? What do we choose to put our attention to?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the Rebbe gave him an example to refocus his mind with. But why didn't the Rebbe use the example of Aaron's sons who chose to draw close to Hashem, so close that they were consumed in that moment? I mean, that's an example of something that is kind of beyond our understanding, but the example is right in front of us.
So the example speaks about that example all the time. And it's the example we talk about. There's a desire to cling to God and to cling to the infinite to the point of non-existence, but that's not the mission, that's not the goal, that's not the job, right? So then in that sense, that's an escapism. And that's why they're punished, because that, yes, they did succeed in becoming extinguished, and they're so rejoining God completely, but that's not God's purpose. That's not the mission.
And at that particular moment, that's not the mission.
Right.
But can't you switch it around that it could become the mission, in that his sacrifice, his all-consuming sacrifice, was the thing that saved everyone else.
Their choice what led to the loss of their life, but that was their choice. We're talking about a situation where you didn't have a choice. Tragic things happen, but sometimes we can reframe the tragic and say that the tragic events were moments, and we can either focus on those moments. You know, I've always had a problem with the slogan of never again, because the focus of never again, while trying to prevent further genocide, it's still focused completely on the negative, rather than focusing on the disaster of the Holocaust and what was lost. We could choose to focus on those who survived and thrived and how to move forward. You know, when you have someone who's been through trauma, they can get fixated on the trauma, and that is the focus of the rest of their life, like never again. Or we can choose to acknowledge that was what it was. What can we do with this, and go forward? But that shouldn't define the rest of life. The idea is to be able to find moments of victory and success and celebrate those. You know, I share success moments with my kids, and in one sense, sometimes I feel like I'm bragging. You know, moments of success that have happened that are great things that came about, right? But I share those because I want my kids to be able to learn to acknowledge their successes, not just the failures. To be able to focus and celebrate every time we actually get something actually gets accomplished. And so we need to create a culture that celebrates real successes. And what if the newspapers only ran stories about beautiful events that happened, wonderful stories that happened, and the tragic stuff is it's relegated to the last 2 pages, and only short articles.
That's the New York Times during wartime.
Yeah, again, so the idea is if we focus on successes and celebrate the successes, we can hopefully, do more with that.
But they say it won't sell the newspapers.
Yeah.
But that's because
I mean, that's what they say. I'm saying that's what they say.
Right. Exactly. Because people are interested in the gory stuff and the failures and that sells the magazines, right? But if our culture changed and our culture was to focus on successes, and that's what we all want to hear about, then that would be far more encouraging environment to be in.
Actually, I have a interesting
Yes.
point on that. We actually have started, I think 3 years ago, the La Prensa newspaper for San Antonio, and it's the only what's it called? It's the only printed paper in San Antonio that is both English and Spanish. And I talked to and I was reading all of them, and I talked to the vice president. We only post good news on it, and it's been growing since it started.
Awesome.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that is what can heal the culture. The focus on the positive, the focus on the good, because there is a lot more going on that's amazing, right? We've never been in a time and place when good things can happen as quickly as they do. Now, granted, negative does also. But illnesses that 30 years ago were a death sentence, many of them are not anymore. It's a different world. And so, again, it's what we choose to focus on. We need to choose to make an environment around us that focuses on the positive and sees the good in all the different challenges and difficulties.
What would you?
And it's hard. It's hard work.
What about when the body traps the soul? When I say that, like a person with Alzheimer's. Do you understand what I'm getting?
Absolutely, absolutely. So when my dad was suffering with Alzheimer's, one of the things that I came to in my own perspective was Dad's kind of out of the picture. In fact, the last family photo we took, I haven't even hung up, because when I look at the photo, I can already see in his eyes, he's already gone. So that person with Alzheimer's, my dad's not that person. My dad was a different one. This person, it's not about Dad. It's about how we manage his care in a loving and caring way. And so it's not about him anymore. It becomes about us. And for example, I know someone who went to visit family, and his grandmother has Alzheimer's. He sat across the table from grandmother, and he had arrived on Friday. He didn't actually see her until Sunday. He tried to get there on Friday, but he didn't. And she kept asking him repeatedly. She asked him, "So when did you come? You came on Friday. Why didn't you come on Friday to visit me?" And she kept repeating this again and again and again for an hour, right? And I taught my mother, when she was dealing with Dad and Alzheimer's, I taught her about therapeutic lying.
Yeah.
I got here this morning, Grammy. I came right to see you. She's not going to remember the other one way or the other, right? But which one feels good in the moment? So lie, for goodness sake. Let the person feel good in the moment. Don't be so caught up in my righteousness that I can't tell a lie. If that person is going to feel better, and it's not going to do anybody harm, it's not going to cheat anybody out of money or something else, then therapeutic lying. Let them feel good in the moment. I came right to see you, Grammy.
Is that the excuse that the politicians use?
Probably.
Watch it, David.
Oh, I'm watching it.
That's the problem. We're all watching it.
I mean, we're
There's a
all watching it.
beautiful-
Yeah, I mean, there is the statement that things would be so much smoother and so much easier. But then again, we have politicians.
There's a beautiful country song about the country singer says, in the song, he says he works at the nursing home as a janitor. But Mrs. Jones in room 205, he has coffee with her every morning. He brings her in coffee. She thinks he's her son,
There you go.
and she, tells him to wash up before daddy comes home, and can't believe it's already 1929, and, all these other things. But he mentions in the song that there's a cross in Arlington with her son's name on it.
Yeah.
And so until they meet again, he's going to stand in as best he can and give her that comfort.
Nice.
There's no point in telling the truth that it's only going to cause more pain, and it's
Right.
not causing any other damage, right? So politicians, no, that's not what I'm talking about, Dave.
Oh,
Don't
good.
put that in there. But I'm talking about caring and loving, and not being so just and upright that we can't tell a comforting lie when that's actually helpful. That's the bottom line. So, yeah, Alzheimer's is a toughie.
Terrible.
But there are ways to mitigate. There are ways to mitigate, and it's funny. I don't know if I told you the story, but I told my mom years ago. I said, music is really powerful in illness, and so she may like country music, but Dad likes classical music. So she would play classical, and it would be comforting for Dad, right? And I remember one time I was visiting, and Dad, he took hold of my hand and he said, I think your mother's starting to like classical music. She's playing it all the time in the house now. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, right? It's we find ways. But going back to the topic for the class, right, is being able to reframe difficult times, and also to be able to acknowledge that those moments, they might be definitive moments, but we don't have to live in that. We can choose to build a new life and go on in newer ways. And I want to use this occasion to shine a light on my buddy. Gary, turn your mic off now because I'm putting you on the spot. Gary is one of my mentors and heroes, and he's gone through hell this year, and he continues to talk positively about it. So let's get an update. How's your titanium leg?
Oh, well, it's only got a little bit of titanium in it. Most of it's stainless steel. If you want to see it, I can take it off and show it to you.
Show and tell.
You want? Say what?
Show and
You
tell.
want to see it? You show and tell? It'll only take a second. Hold on.
He's definitely going to have a leg up on you.
Oh,
Yep, for sure.
oh.
So I did walk half a mile on the indoor track at the university this morning, and then I went to PT. So that's it right there. Yeah. Yeah. Carbon fiber and everything. So I'm still not back at work. They wanted me to learn how to walk a little bit better before I return. So hopefully January is when I'm going to start back. But things are progressing along. My tibia, the shin bone, has been a little bit tender because that's now my weight bearing bone for my entire body. And if you can imagine your shin bone being the bone that your entire weight is now. That's the bone. That's the weight bearing bone for me. So it has to build up what they call bone callus, and that's a little painful process to get that there, but we're getting there. I can walk short distances with the cane or just one crutch. I use forearm crutches, and but I can walk quite a distance with forearm crutches. And I drive, and you know, I'm getting there slowly but surely. So it's nice to have it's nice to have two legs. I can still count to 15. I can say
Awesome.
3 out of 4 ain't bad.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And this,
That's the
this is the
spirit.
example that I'm talking about, right? Is that
Yep.
facing painful challenges, but being able to do so with humor and choosing to do so conscientiously. And I think that's where we really want to be able to go, is to be able to reframe the challenges and painful times in life and be able to reframe them and say, you know, what was the positive in that? What were positive outcomes that come from that? You know, what the Marines say about if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right? Or weakness is pain is only weakness leaving the body. You know, that's the Marine Corps thing. So it's that mindset of focusing always on the positive and being able to reframe challenges in ways that, that again, move towards a positive inside of them.
And humor is essential.
Humor.
Matter of fact, there's a German saying that says, Humor ist, wenn man trotzdem lacht. Humor
I
is
can't
when,
say that. I can't say that 3 times fast.
well, maybe I can teach you to say it 1 time slowly. Actually, what it means, humor is when you laugh despite of it.
In spite of it. It makes you feel good inside.